They all had that quality to them. But one of the things that all of them had, the one trait that I think all of those guys had, was they could get you to deviate off of your baseline really quick. And so they can get you to curse. That's step one. They get you to say something that's a little bit outside of a social norm. They would all do that as step one. Every single time.
Huh. So what like in the cults, how would they do that? What would they try to get you to deviate from? What would they try to get you to do?
So their goal was to get you to agree to join the cult. So if I can get you to do something that's outside of your norm.
You just listened to a quick back and forth between Joe Rogan and Chase Hughes, a behavior profiling expert known for his work on the subtle cues people use to deceive, manipulate, and control others. What did Chase Hughes say was the first step that cult recruiters take when recruiting others into a cult? I'll play it back so that you can catch it.
But one of the things that all of them had, the one trait that I think all of those guys had, was they could get you to deviate off of your baseline really quick. And so they can get you to curse. That's step one. They get you to say something that's a little bit outside of a social norm. They would all do that as step one.
So Chase says this about cult recruiters. They could get you to deviate off of your baseline really quick. So if they can get you to curse, that's step one. If they can get you to say something a little out of the social norm, that's step one. What type of baseline does a cult recruiter try to get you off of? Your emotional baseline. In other words, cult recruiters introduce you to a state of derp. What's a state of derp? A state of derp is a triggered state of mind in which your emotions are so intense that your cognition and rationality took a major hit. Cult leaders say, "Are you getting a little emotional? Ooh, we like that. This tendency needs to be developed further. Ooh, get into being in an altered state of mind. Why does everything have to be about being rational?" But the rest of us understand that pushing for emotionalism is truly demonic. Was that the life of Christ? I'm pretty sure it wasn't. The life of Christ demonstrated that rationality is righteousness. Matthew 23:13. He says to them, "It's written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you freaks make it a den of robbers." Reacting to the cognitive dissonance between what it was supposed to function as and what it actually functioned as. Matthew 23:27, he calls Pharisees out for being scammers who talk a big game, but are like whitewashed tombs. Mark 3:4, he says, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save a life or kill?" In response to getting complaints from religious leaders and politicians who were engaged in a game of chronic dishonesty, trying to make him look bad for breaking religious law. And on it goes. Welcome back to my channel. Today's red flags are triangulation, emotionalism, and false narrative. Now remember, triangulation is bringing in a third party into a conflict to establish a common enemy for control and manipulation purposes.
You ain't the only one who's dealing with triangulation, Jerry. Lacey always turns her two-person mess into a group project. Some people don't solve problems, Jerry. They just want to expand them. Like a gas, Jerry. Like a gas.
Dr. Vaknin said this about narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths.
Virulent envy. When psychopaths and narcissists envy someone, it frustrates them. They want to take that someone down. They want to rip that someone apart. They want to destroy that someone. And one of the ways to accomplish this is by initiating a smear campaign.
Here's an envious narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath, aka derper, doing something diagnosed sociopath and psychopath Kanakabatras says is second nature to them, using triangulation to add two members to the herd. And now those two members are naturally spreading his false narrative and have added a third herd member. After the third herd member comes on board, the envious narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath will point to all three members and then to himself and use reaction formation to say, "Look at this person all the people have a problem with. That's a high conflict person. And they are fortunate that I am here to stand up to high conflict people. When in reality, the derp are triangulated so that all of these folks would get themselves involved and have a problem with that individual. Let's talk about other red flags of the triangulation con. An emotional triggering story designed to put you in a state of derp. It just so happens that it's emotional and triggering and puts you in a state of derp. No, these are what are called manufactured narratives. Yet another example of chronic dishonesty and extreme manipulativeness. The derpers want to give you an emotional false narrative that throws you off balance and gets a strong emotional reaction out of you. It might be rage. It might be shock and a sense of betrayal. It might be fear. And oops, now you're in a state of derp with your cognition scrambling. The second red flag is that they get an emotional reaction out of you and get you to aim it at someone who you now think is the common enemy or the aggressor. You strike out at the person the derper said is the aggressor or your common enemy. The standard lie used by derpers is that their intended target is crazy. But Dr. Vaknin points out that the people who are involved in smear campaigns tend to have mental illnesses. The third red flag of the triangulation con is that narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths are pushers of passive aggression. They cannot afford for their lies and chronic dishonesty to be discovered, and they have no interest in resolving anything. So rather than allowing you to tell the intended target what you're upset about, they tell you to be persistently passive-aggressive. Hiding their lies is such a priority that the derpers also scream that you should not only presume intended targets guilty, but never tell those targets what you presume them guilty of. When we agree to those terms, understand that we put ourselves literally thousands of light years away from the current system of justice here in the United States, where we presume people innocent until proven guilty. It is this type of personality for whom the rules must always be different. One set of rules for you and another set of rules for me. The fourth and final red flag of the triangulation con is the most insidious. After you've lashed out at the intended target with persistent passive aggression, the intended target responds to your passive aggression with hostility. Now, by derper logic, that proves the intended target is crazy and has a bad temper, supposedly. But derper logic isn't logic at all. Healthy, normal people confront their attackers directly. Things are resolved out in the open, with the anticipation of mutual honesty and sincerity. Expectations that cannot be met in cases of pathological behavior problems. And when healthy, normal people return a serve full of passive aggression from a third party, that's what makes the triangulation complete. That's what truly sells the false narrative. People who notice these things, however, learn to leave the triangulation incomplete. Serves full of passive aggression are not returned, which quickly becomes a sore spot for the derpers.
It is a narrative. Smear campaign is a narrative. Every smear campaign has a story that motivates it, the engine, the narrative engine. And it includes role reversal. Whereas the vast majority of the instigators of smear campaigns are actually perpetrators and offenders, they pretend to be the victims. They point the finger at someone else. They say, he or she is the offender. He or she is the perpetrator. He or she is the cruel one, the evil one. I am the exact opposite. I'm all pure, and I'm all clean. I'm all unadulterated. So it's a narrative role reversal.
So a smear campaign is a narrative role reversal in which the bad guys mask up and wear holy robes, while the good guys are not only presumed guilty, but are never even told what they're presumed guilty of. And now you see how triangulation is one way this narrative role reversal is achieved. By the time they achieve abuse by proxy, the derpers have completely exposed themselves as narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths because they've had to triangulate over and over again. If you have no experience with this level of chronic dishonesty and extreme manipulativeness, what on earth are you doing in the satanic conflict you've been invited into? Narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths need their biggest supporters nerfed. The derpers can't afford to deal with you when your IQ is high and your mind is clear. One sign that your IQ is being suppressed is that someone has to tell you that it is a bad idea to go along with the supposed system of justice that was present during the Dark Ages. Dr. Vaknin also said this.
So, as I said, the smear campaign is initiated and instigated 100% of the time by mentally disturbed people.
Why are people with mental disorders brought in? That's part of the con, the scam. When I worked in clinical psychology for the first year, I always believed the people with personality disorders who soft-pedaled how severe their issues and episodes actually were. Why? Because I used myself as a reference, and as time went by, that high degree of naivete and delusion wore off. I learned to differentiate. The average person has no clue how naive and delusional they are about what a personality disorder is. Once again, we're running into the chronic dishonesty and extreme manipulativeness of the derpers.
The smear campaigns diverts and distracts the mentally ill people who have started it from their own culpability, their own guilt, and their own shame. And usually the cult leader who starts the smear campaign has this rescuer, savior, fixer, healer, crusader complex. Like, this is not a smear campaign, he would say. This psychopathic cult leader, he would say, this is not a smear campaign. The inducer would say, it's not a smear campaign. I am exposing evil people, and I'm going to punish them. And I'm going to save vulnerable women or vulnerable children or what have you. So the inducer of the smear campaign, who is 100% rank psychopath and a cult leader, and worse, usually this kind of person does abuse, molest other people, women and children included. But he presents it as if he is targeting the victim of the smear campaign because the victim has done something wrong.
So the rank psychopathic cult leader of a smear campaign is a sexual molester who accuses the target of sexual molestation. The derpers want their intended targets to feel guilty for things they never did. Now you understand what's wrong with a trigger focus, hopefully. Now you understand that the justice system that was present during the Dark Ages does not need a comeback, hopefully. And the rank psychopathic cult leader of a smear campaign understands that nothing destroys a person more quickly and easily than false allegations of sexual molestation. As Christians, we are obligated to own what we did and not obligated to own what we didn't do. Matthew 5:37 says, "Let your yes be yes and your no, no." People who do not follow this scripture are a menace to society. There are psychological profiles created against them for this reason. Thank you so much for joining me on this video. I'll see you later. Much love and God bless.